Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this first session of the year from the VPH Society. I'm Liesbet. Next to me is Janaki Raman, the scientific officer from VPH. And today we would like to give you a first appreciation or a first indication of some of the changes, the recent changes in policy. Can just confirm that indeed my slides are, yes, perfectly visible. Okay, good. So maybe before we start, some housekeeping arrangements. We want this to really be an interactive briefing session. That is why all of you also have the opportunity to share or to unmute yourselves and to also turn on your camera. At certain points throughout the session, we will ask for your feedback, and so you can raise your hand and ask a question, or you can type your question in the question or the chat, whatever is available to you, and then we will either ask you to give your talk, or we will read the question. You can also indicate what your preference would be. At the same time, we also would like to do a few questions in a poll. So there is this WooClub tool that we will be using. You can use your phone to scan the QR code right now, or you can go to the website wooclub.com and then add the event code. And this event code will be broadcasted or will be shown at the top of every question. So even if you miss it right now, you can always come back to this later. Okay, with this arrangements done, what we would like to do today is, so we will start by giving you some introduction into the EU policy and regulatory as far as it concerns the in silico medicine community, and then try to talk you through some of the history, some of the challenges that we currently are facing, and then some of the shifts that have recently been taking place and what they actually could mean for the in silico community, and then at the end go towards how we can actually further influence this and continue to influence this, and so what might be the path forward. So the goals of today would really be to take you on this journey that we've been on from even before the VPH was started. Some of that journey has also been, of course, together with the industry partners in the context of the Avicenna Alliance. We will look specifically at the policies and the regulatory aspects, and then see what is done, what is proposed, what is still to be done. Now, this is, of course, our interpretation based on the texts that have been circulated. Neither Janaki nor myself are legal scholars. So there's, of course, always that interpretation that needs to be done. We will also not go into that level of detail yet, that this would be able to be usable, let's say, in a legal situation. Now, from the questions, the pre-registration questions, we also noticed that some of you submitted specific questions with respect to software as a medical device, what evidence was necessary, etc. Those specific questions are actually for the second briefing, where we will delve a bit deeper or dive a bit deeper into the specifics of, for medical devices and for pharma, how this works on the regulatory side of things. So today is more the broad policy overview, the legislation that is actually influencing that regulatory situation that we will go into next time. So with all of this, I would like to invite you to answer just a few questions to get started, to warm up, let's say. It would be, the first one is, are you aware of these policy texts that were submitted? So that seems to be, I think, was almost close to a 50-50, but now it's more a 60-40 distribution of many of you are aware of the texts. So that's already something. For the others, we will start from, as they say in your courses in university, we will start from zero, but then we will go a bit fast, since we only have 90 minutes in total. So the second question would then be, if you have read the text, of course, if you haven't, you can sit this one out. If you've heard of these things, have you actually read bits and pieces of it? And if so, which text have you read bits and pieces, right? So it turns out that the MDR is indeed the most looked at version. Some also have seen the breakthrough guidance. That's good. The Biotech Act, as we will very briefly maybe indicate, there are some relevant aspects there as well. There's in Silico and AI is mentioned all over that. So we will definitely be looking into that in the future. But indeed, most of the attention is going to medical devices. All right, and then a final one before we actually get started. This one would be which sections or concepts or things that you were looking for got your attention in these texts. And you can just indicate words, and then after every word you can submit, and then you can submit something else so that we can get an overview of what is it that you were looking for or trying to find. I think the things that you see appearing are indeed the ones that many of us would have scanned for. What is the role of in silico? What is clinical data? What are the timelines that are now going to be in place for notified bodies? And how will they look at new technologies in general and then breakthrough technologies? Okay, thank you very much for that. So let's start from the very beginning now. Who is who in this whole landscape where we are that we're discussing today? So of course we start with the government level, which would be the policymakers at the EU level in this particular case, but also of course you have the national policymakers. They write the policies that are looking at how we handle certain situations with evidence for medical devices, for pharmaceuticals, how we handle all that. They've also installed the path to regulatory acceptance. And there is the general European one, and there are, of course, the national parts. When we look at medical devices, the policymakers have foreseen a medical device coordination group that then writes specific guidances that can further clarify the legal text. For a pharma situation, you have, of course, the European Medicine Agency that then interprets that is in charge of the safety and of the marketing authorization. And then on the national levels, you have the national competent authorities that take all of this evidence, also that look at the evidence and decide on acceptance. Now, additional players are from intergovernmental organizations like the OECD, like the WHO, and the non-governmental organizations that are involved specifically in setting guidances like the ICH or standards like the ISO, IEC, and ASME. These bodies all together come up with a set of rules that are sector specific, and in our sector you have of course the good manufacturing practices, good laboratory practices, good clinical practices. Then you have the quality systems. We have proposed as a community in the past a good proposal for a good simulation practice, which of course does not exist yet. That's why it has a different color here, but it goes along the same lines. And then you have the standards that are being produced and also the certification. So notified bodies or the compliant, the competent, no.
Conformity assessment.
Thank you. The conformity assessment bodies, they execute the conformity assessment and give that information to the national competent authorities. And this then, all of this gets translated into individual organizations in their QMS systems and in their standard operating procedures. So this is at a very high level who is who. Next time when we talk more specifically about the MDR and pharma, we will go a little bit more, we will give a bit more detail of the different bodies in that space. And now I pass on the word to Janaki.
Yeah. Welcome you all. We will try to paint a little bit of the evolution of regulations and medtech as well as pharma, but this is not set on stone, just to give an indication of how things have been evolving in the last 2 decades. The timelines are not strict, but just an indication for you to say where it all started with the current EU medical device regulation. Many of you might have heard of the scandals of the breast implants and the trust issues that happened with the conformity assessment back in 2012. But already there were early discussions to revamp the medical device directive that was already existent at that time of about 2010. but it took almost between 5 to 7 years with a lot of deliberation. With the scandals in place, there was the urgency to revamp the way medical devices are assessed for conformity. So it took a lot of work and a lot of years and a lot of deliberation to transform from directive to a regulation. So this happened, and finally in 2017, we had the EU Medical Device Regulation. Previously, it was MDD, meant Medical Device Directive, which had only recommendations for the member states. But now at EU MDR, we were in a kind of a centralized system. Within Europe, the rules are harmonized throughout Europe. And this happened both for medical devices as well as for in vitro devices. We often say MDR, but the same things apply also for IVDR. At the time when they finalized the EU MDR, it was also earmarked that in 10 years' time, in 2027, there will be a formal re-evaluation of whether the regulation worked, how good it worked, do we need changes. So this is still the timeline that we all foresee for things to change, but things changed as the regulation got rolled out. As you might all know, it officially got rolled out after a few delays owing to different reasons. Officially, MDR came into place in May 2021, but then this meant all the notified bodies which were issuing the certification for CE marking had to also recertify themselves. So suddenly, from over 150 plus notified bodies across Europe, it came down to few 10 or even less to start with, who were eligible to certify medical device products. So there were a lot of backlogs, but all the devices had to be recertified with the introduction of Medical Device Regulation 2017-745. But also what we saw or unexpected things happened was a lot of shortages of supply lines, but also there was not capacity at the notified bodies, and more importantly, COVID struck in 2020. So taking this into account, the Commission and the Parliament had quite some flexibility to extend the transition period. And in that process, what we also saw was a Draghi report, which said that all this had put us in a difficult situation when it comes to competitiveness. So there has been long-standing call now for the last 2 to 5 years that we should look into simplifying some of the things that MDR actually rolled out in 2021. So the call for revision grew louder, and the Commission called for feedback from different stakeholders early in March 2025, but also in September 2025 for evidences. And now in December, they have released the proposal for revising the MDR. So that is where the medical device regulation stands. As far as pharma is concerned, there has been a lot of centralized activities for a long time now, already from about 2010. But there has been a call to revise the pharmaceutical directive, as well as associated directives that were set forth for critical medicines, but also for orphan devices and orphan medicines, as well as for rare diseases. So there has been a proposal to revise the almost 20 years old directive in that space, and an initial proposal came in around 2020. But then also was reinforced with a revision of the clinical trials directive, with a transition period that from 2025 we should be working with the new EU clinical trial legislation. In 2020, what also happened was the Commission came up with the pharmaceutical package, which was not just revamping one legislation, but a series of measures addressing the needs based on the needs that we learned during COVID time, but also something that we needed to change for the evolving landscape. So this pharmaceutical package also changed the way the medicines are regulated throughout Europe. And this has now contributed to additional legislations like the Critical Medicines Act to address the shortages of medicines, as well as Biotech Act. These were still preparations in early 2024, but now in 2025, what we have by December is a pharmaceutical package that has been agreed by the European Parliament, the European Council, and the European Commission, which is a big step forward. And this also had a release of the first version of the Biotech Act.
And at the same time, we've of course been busy on the scientific side, and many things have happened. Many people have strongly contributed to all of these events and to the evolution of in silico medicine. But we've chosen here to highlight some of the key documents that were produced by the entire community, such as the roadmaps that were at the very foundation of the VPH, like the Seeding the Europhysium that started in 2005. That came out in 2007. There is the digital patient roadmap from the Disciples project. There is the in silico clinical trials roadmap, the Avicenna roadmap that was part of the foundational stones of the Avicenna Alliance. And then there was some work the last decade on regulatory science. It started with, of course, the ASME VMV40 that was produced. Oh, and I've put here the wrong one, the VMV20, but of course there's the VMV40 that came out in 2018 that is currently under revision. I think the first draft of that is also available or it came out already. That was also a very intensive process of interaction between different players, industry, regulators, academia. And then in 2024, we produced the book on the towards a good simulation practice that was also contributed to by over 100 people from academia, industry, regulators, HTA, ethics bodies, etc. And then the number of projects related to in silico medicine grew again at the end of Horizon 2020. And also we had a new roadmap that came out just last year on the virtual human twin initiative that was launched by the European Commission at the end of 2023 as one of their new flagship programs. So if you read these documents, you can really see the evolution of very early on, the initial steps in silico medicine, and then the maturation of the field, the embracement of regulatory science principles in the basic work that we do, and then the incorporation towards the end, the incorporation of all the stakeholders, and really the growing of a very strong and mature ecosystem, which is a very strong basis for then the rest of the work that we will be explaining today.
So we saw the evolution in the space of the science around in silico methods, but then it was a big contributor towards the regulatory science, both in pharma and medtech. Just a quick status update of where it stands when it comes to pharma in Europe. So we are predominantly or almost focused typically in Europe. So just to give a quick indication of the current status with the pharmaceutical side, EMA has been at the forefront of looking into modeling and simulation evidence for a long time. We have had long collaboration. As early as 2018, we had a tangible guideline on how to use modeling and simulation as part of reporting data results from modeling and simulation as part of submissions. But also EMA has been at the forefront of embracing modeling and simulation right through its strategy and various roadmaps that it had put forth. This is just a quick example of a couple of documents on their regulatory strategy for regulatory science roadmap that was published in 2020. There they indicated that modeling and simulation has a critical role, but they then also backed it up with subsequent review period and continued to keep that importance right along. But it's not just in the strategy or a vision document, but they also transformed this into practical implementation, where the methodology working party was formed, where we could go and talk about the technical details of modeling and simulation being part of the regulatory dossiers. Of course, we were not in isolation. There was a lot happening in the global space as well, with the ICH M15 guideline that came out on model-informed drug development, having a very unique space for modeling and simulation, which is also widely adopted but championed throughout EMA and the regulatory folks within Europe. Of course, while this was happening from the regulatory side, from the regulators, there was also a lot of enthusiasm from the community where we dared to go to the regulators as part of qualification opinion, not only from our community, but all along from various actors, both from the industry, academia, and the scientific community, that we challenged, we presented modeling and simulation evidence as part of qualification opinion to the regulators. So there is quite a good dialogue happening in the space of pharma at the moment, though it is slow, it is small, it is still a very positive development when it comes to use of in silico methods for regulatory science in pharma. So now we will switch gears, go towards what is the space for medical devices. So we did walk through a little bit about how MDR came into place in 2021, but what does MDR, the medical device regulation, Europe say about in silico? When it got rolled out in 2021, the initial text had multiple references to modeling and simulation, but it was referring to it in two specific places to our understanding. It's biophysical or modeling research when it talked about what device manufacturers could do to demonstrate their compliance of their design. And then later in Annex 7, when it comes to notified bodies, what sort of evidence they could look into, but this was limited only for preclinical evidence. So there, the terms that was used correspond to simulated use testing or computer modeling. So the current MDR as it stands today has references to modeling and simulation using these terms, modeling or computer modeling, or sometimes also in practice used as simulated use testing. Of course, it's just a term. They do mean in silico as part of this. But as it got rolled out, the term in silico was not there. But this became a problem because there was no further guidance or clarification either from the subsequent forums like the MDCG to say that in silico can be considered as part of regular EU MDR evaluation. So this was how it came in 2021. But of course, things evolved, not only for us, because there were a lot of things that were not clear when MDR came. So there were a number of guidances that got rolled out through the Medical Device Coordination Group. And one of those guidances was about how to look at the clinical evidence needed for medical devices back in 2020. This guidance is very important because this is often the most referred one when you want to apprise the evidence that you submit to get the approval of your device. Especially this guidance was meant for legacy devices, which got approved in the previous legislation, which is MDD, the directive. So if you want to recertify that product within the new legislation, you have to go through this guidance to apprise the kind of evidence that you have to meet the current MDR. So one of the important elements of this guidance document is this Annex 3, which has a specific table that ranks the different levels of evidence that can be admissible for approving a product. So of this number of evidences, it has over 12 evidence sources that it accepts. The top 4 is specifically meant for high-risk devices. Especially they say that it's class 3 legacy devices and implantable legacy devices, where you cannot go below 4 or above 4. So you have to submit an evidence between 1 to 4. And what do those count to is high quality clinical investigation. By clinical investigation, we mean clinical trial data, because in Europe with MDR, the clinical trials are referred to as clinical investigation. For medicines, it's clinical trials. So whenever I say clinical investigation, it means clinical trials, as you might be familiar with. So they recommend high quality clinical investigation with some gaps, but you can justify them. Or you can also come out with the registry data, which is of sufficient quality and can be justified. And finally, if you have some studies which are having some flaws, but again, you can justify and explain those flaws. Only those 4 evidence qualities of the evidences are accepted to review the submission for high-risk medical devices. And what they say specifically is that for high-risk devices, it has to be at minimum level 4. And what happened with this guidance is they inadvertently or intentionally mentioned the word high quality. So that meant anything above 4 is of low quality, became an inherent meaning. So what are those that are sitting above 4? I will just quickly walk you through here. These are recommended not for high-risk medical devices, especially implantable devices, rather class 2A, class 2B, non-implantable devices, often referred to as low-risk or medium-risk devices. There are a number of them between 6 to 12. And among them, what you see is also some of these that devices for which the evidence comes from a similar device used in humans are not considered as clinical data under the current MDR. Likewise, other data like, for example, questionnaires taken as part of post-market surveillance are considered low-quality clinical data. Now you might be wondering, where are we sitting in terms of in silico? As you might have already spotted, it's at number 11, where we are last but one, listed as simulated use. That's often the place where in silico evidence could be considered. Though the table that I show from the guidance document here, that number 11 and 12 here, say that it is not a clinical data. You can use it still for demonstrating the safety of the device for usability and safety. It doesn't say that it's low quality, but because the top 4 evidences that come from clinical investigation are earmarked as high quality evidence, obviously in silico evidence is often referred in the regulatory space as low quality non-clinical data. So this is an important status quo as it stays today from the current MDR and the guidance. Of course, after this guidance that came for legacy devices, the same practice is applied even for new devices that comes, because the mindset is if it is an existing medical device or a new one, we will still follow this because there has not been a specific update to our understanding for clarifying these aspects. Of course, there has been one additional guidance that came through in 2024, which corresponds to orphan devices, where both the commission as well as the regulators who are reviewing these processes as part of conformity assessment indicated that we can be a bit flexible and we will accept more evidence sources. And there they clarified that in silico, especially computer modeling and simulated use testing data, can be submitted to show the equivalence for clinical data. But again, this was listed under non-clinical data. It was not earmarked as low quality, but it was said that in silico could be submitted, but it comes to the bucket of non-clinical data and not clinical data. Of course, collectively, what this all gave us to handle is use of in silico evidence in EU remains a stumbling block, because when you speak to regulators, they cannot have a pathway that they can accept in silico as it stays in the MDR, not only for high-risk devices, but also low and medium-risk devices as on date. So with this stumbling block, we will just walk you through of how we try to tackle this in the last few years.
Thanks, Janaki. Indeed, so when that was identified, that in silico had that place as non-clinical or not clinical evidence, we already anticipated that this might lead to issues, especially given that around the same time there was the report from FDA who had approved the example of the pacemaker with a full in silico clinical trial. That is something that would never be able to be realized under the current MDR. So we were going to do some activities or engage with regulators. Who is we? Well, you see here the triangle that connects the policymakers with the users and the technical developers. So whereas we in the community, of course, we're working mostly on the technical development and developing tools for the users in the in silico space. We have the policymakers on the other side that create legislation and incentives. And in order to not have every one of us needing to go and find our policymakers and our politicians separately, we unite ourselves in the community. And VPH, as you know, is the International Society for in silico Medicine, and not just a scientific society, but from the very inception of the VPH, we've been engaging with policymakers. So we have some early activities with policymakers there. And then 5 years after the inception of the VPH, also the alliance with industry was formally baptized as the Avicenna Alliance as a result of the Avicenna road mapping exercise. So together with the Avicenna Alliance, we've been very active in trying to engage with policymakers and with regulators to show what in silico is about, what it can do, what might be the stumbling blocks, and what might be the challenges, as Janaki has just explained. So I'll walk you through some of the activities that we've done, starting with the activities on the policy level. And there are 4. So we have the advocacy itself, the public consultations, the parliament actions, and the public forums. So in terms of advocacy, we've tried to have one-on-one dialogues and have direct channels with members of the European Commission, DG Connect, DG Sante, DG RTD. So, but in this case, it's mostly through DG Connect, but also then recently more and more with DG Sante. There's the European Parliament that, of course, every time that there is a new election, we need to find new allies in the Parliament. Luckily, some allies get re-elected. We have been member of the stakeholder group as VPH in the previous cycle. In the current cycle, the Avicenna Alliance is member of the eHealth stakeholder group, and that's a place where we can meet with other organizations, so other community organizations that are involved in this space at the interface between health and IT. There is the writing of position papers and publications that we engage with, not just our own papers, but also trying to participate in other papers from the community. In terms of public consultations, at the very beginning of VPH, we've already started working on or started to reply to public consultations in the very early phases of the MDR legislation. We were, of course, less powerful. There was also very little AI, so people were not so much aware of this or even more skeptical about anything that can be done in the computer. But recently then, when the MDR, there was this push for the revision of the MDR, also a number of additional public consultations were opened. And we've been trying also to get some of them together with the Alliance, some together with projects to respond to these public consultations for the MDR division, for the mechanistic models of EMA, for the Biotech Act, the evidence gathering for the MDR, and then recently also on the breakthrough devices. All these public consultations or these replies can be found on the website of the VPH. Then we have been involved in organizing and participating in specific parliament actions that were always championed by one or more MEPs to bring in silico into the parliament. There were very early actions that were sponsored by Prodi and Sean Kelly on the in silico medicine when we were working on disciples and the start of the Avicenna. There was then, once the Avicenna was established, an event that was sponsored by a Belgian MEP inside that was a broader audience where also American colleagues were involved. We've been together or through the Avicenna Alliance been working or get involved in MEP training, so explaining the 101 when it comes to in silico. And then more recently, there was an Avicenna Alliance organized meeting in the ENVI committee, and then through the actions at the end of EDITH, VPH was given the opportunity to kick off a new series in the Public Health Committee, so the SANT committee in the European Parliament, which led us to engage with multiple MEPs at the same time, called Excellence in Science, where we presented a broad overview of what in silico is, what it can do, and how it links to specific policy activities that they're engaged in. So that was really an exercise where we were also assisted by people that know the policy language that can help us explain what it is that MEPs want to see and how to explain things to them. And then, of course, in the public forums like stakeholder meetings, policy events, we always try to be there and represent the in silico community with very specific examples and challenges that we get from all of you and from the members. When it comes to regulators, some of the tools are, of course, the same: public consultations, direct engagement, recurring engagements that we're trying to set up, and then participation in conferences. The consultations on the MDR, the breakthrough guidance, and for instance, the EMA, that are things that we have been working on. The engagement, the direct engagement, like in participation in EMA workshops, and we are very happy to see that, or to be able to observe that EMA is finding us more regularly now. If they have questions on modeling and on digital twins, synthetic data, they invite us to come and explain or give a pitch. We do notice there that sometimes there is a very varying level of understanding of modeling and simulation, but it's very good. The conversation, the door is open, and they've identified us. So that is a very big step in the right direction. With conformity assessment bodies, it has taken a long time because, as Janaki explained, they were very much swamped by the requirements of the MDR. But now, as we will explain also next week, we are setting up really targeted or direct and recurring events with them, so that we can ask our questions and they can understand what it is that we want to know, that we can have a conflict of interest free place to have these conversations and to mutually learn how to deal with the in silico data. And then there are MDCG working groups where we're trying to get our place on the table, and then we have been trying to participate in multiple events, also organized by members, like in the University Hospital of Leuven. There was a whole day meeting with DG Santé so that they could understand what the effects were. And we've been able to participate there, which has also led to very interesting conversations. Then recurring engagement, so we're continuously watching the policy space, trying to participate in strategic sessions, accepting to be part of expert groups, and also trying to find the regulators where they are at the conferences that they attend, like the RAPS conference. We're a member of the Noble Cup initiative. We're also attending conferences, not only on the European side, but also on the FDA side. And then the final one, activities and standards. So on the international space, and this is very much driven by the Avicenna Alliance, through all the activities from the members that are involved in ASME VMV40, that are looking at also the IMDRF, that have been pushing forward the guidance of how to use modeling and simulation, and then towards the best, or gathering the best practices in the GSP. So the aim is there always to be proactive, to draft, to review, to comment, to participate and deliver trainings for adoption, to deliver use cases, and to try and leverage the work that is done internationally on the European side. And then on the European side itself, we've been successful, and then we is indeed a combination of the Avicenna Alliance specific projects like the In Silico World project that was working very much on this, and other individual initiatives, has led to the creation of the ISO IEC working group that is preparing a standard, and that was recently approved, so the work will start very soon, that will prepare a standard on the credibility assessment of modeling and simulation. So with this, this has all led, if we combine this all together, to things that we are very happy to notice in different regulations. In December, at the end of December, the Commission launched a number of proposed texts, starting with the Breakthrough Technologies Guidance, which is a part of the current MDR, so that is in that framework. They also released the revised MDR text that responds to a number of concerns that were raised by us and by many other people. There was also a proposal of the Biotech Act that was mentioned already earlier, that might be something that we should not be overlooking, and also the cardiovascular plan that was, because the Biotech Act, sorry, just to come to that, they also see this as a way to solve some of the issues with the clinical trials regulation. So in that sense, it is important to look at, and in Silico and AI are all over this text. So we definitely need to keep an eye on this. And then the cardiovascular plan, of course, which proposes or shows what they're planning to do in this new mission next to the cancer mission that they have. Now, we will not say that everything that is in Silico is coming from us, but we do recognize some language, and we're very happy about that. And that is what Janaki will now explain.
Yeah. So before we jump back into the in silico scope, I would like to quickly walk you through, because MDR revision is a massive one for the whole of the sector. So it's something that we might be all interested in, whether we are working on modeling and simulation or not. So I have a very brief, very high level capturing from what I picked up from other communities. So just to give you an indication of what other things are changing, or what is that the main thing that changes in the MDR that we can foresee in the proposal. Again, these are not changes. These are just proposals put forth for revision, we will not know what goes in and what gets kicked out. But at least what we can feel good about is there has been a long-standing call for the revision, and these are the immediate changes. The first one is on the certification validity, because on the rollout of MDR, what happened was every single device that was previously approved had to go for a recertification every 5 years. So their certification would expire. So now this is proposed that there would not be a need to recertify, and rather there will be a continuous risk-based assessment in discussions with the notified body, that the certificate expiry and validity is a major impact that the industry will benefit from. Further to that, there has been a lot of simplification on various layers. One of that is clinical data. So I touched on that briefly, that we are listed under in silico, but then the need for clinical data by which only clinical investigation done on humans in a prospective manner is the only source of data was the current status. That remains the case. The current proposal says that we can be a bit more broader than that. I will walk you through a little later of what is this. But there is also some additional simplification in terms of classification, but also relaxing the timelines for post-market surveillance reports. Of course, one major change that came in now with the AI Act in the last few years had an impact on MDR, where there were a lot of double calls, like we need to have a QMS system, one for MDR, one for AI, and a lot of interplays were not clear. So what this revision proposal comes up with is it has moved MDR and IVDR from a specific section called Section A to Section B, which means that we might have MDR taking precedence over AI Act, but still there are certain aspects of which AI Act which we might have to follow, especially when it comes to high-risk AI systems. But the clarity and the certain amendments that would be needed is something still to evolve, but there is a major linking between the AI Act and the MDR, which was not clear before. Of course, there were other initiatives related to digital omnibus, which was also coming up with amendments. So we would not know whether the MDR revision proposal goes through first or the digital omnibus provisions. But either ways, there is some clarity that is coming up when it comes to whether all medical devices are AI and which legislation takes precedence. There is a specific article called Article 82, which was meant for clinical investigation that was not determined, that was not towards the path to get a CE mark. In other words, for example, if you're doing research in a university hospital or in an academic setting and involving human subjects, you were previously subjected to Article 82, even if you are not going in for a CE marking. Current proposal says that the Article 82 will be deleted. But what is not made clear, and this is rightly flagged by the regulatory experts, that what happens to the data that you do as part of clinical research can thus still be counted as a valid evidence later downstream if in case you go for CE marking. These are always open questions for all these changes that are coming, which we do not know yet, but I'm just giving you a high level picture of what is changing on the broader scale. To speed up a bit, on the notified body review, things are simplified when it comes to the frequency of technical review, be it on sampling, the timeline, and the periodicity. The fee structure will be predictable, will be made predictable, and the pre-submission structured dialogue, as we had been long calling for, similar to the US FDA's pre-submission engagement. This will become the norm. Of course, this is also well supplemented with unique pathways for innovative devices, especially breakthrough devices, as well as for orphan devices, for which there is already a guidance, but the current legislation proposal also includes them within the legislation. So it's not just a guidance, but the legislation also speaks of specific pathways for breakthrough and orphan, by which what happens is if a device is designated as orphan or a breakthrough, it can be then given priority for review at the notified body, and there will be also rolling review, by which they mean that there can be at the starting a lot of uncertainty which they would be able to consider, but they will review the approval of the device as the evidence gets generated in some of these pathways. One major bottleneck when it comes to orphan devices is that legacy orphan devices were not going to stand through the transition period. Now that grandfathering has been addressed, by which they say that the legacy orphan devices can still continue to remain in the market even after the transition period. There is also mention of regulatory sandboxes, especially for emerging technologies like AI, and of course, Silico could also be part of that at both EU level as well as national level. But the specifics are yet to emerge. But there are some interesting projects like the Bridge project, which is looking into regulatory sandboxes in particular that we will have to keep an eye on. Finally, on the governance space, this is for the whole sector. There is more capacity that is being added at the level of EMA for medical devices, and expert panels would be also looking into not only the questions that are related to clinical investigation, but there will be also expanded role in terms of clarifying on classification questions, designation questions for orphan or breakthrough devices. Of course, they would also expand their profile beyond clinical by adding into regulatory, scientific, as well as technical clarification for the expert panels. So with that, I will wrap up the high-level overview of what changes in the MDR with respect to the sector and dive a little bit deeper into the specifics of Silico. I already would like to caution that I'm not going to go too detailed because that's more for the second webinar that we foresee. Here, it is just an introduction for you to see what has actually changed or what they propose to change when it comes to Silico. That will be the focus. So to start with, I would like to point out that there has been a clear acknowledgement from the Commission that various stakeholders across different sectors, be it industry, academia, scientific, clinic, are all recognizing the value of Silico. So that is very heartwarming to see, because previously it was only us who were saying that Silico would be relevant to look into when you look at different sources of evidence. But now the Commission, looking through the feedback that it received all through this consultation process, echoes those sentiments from different stakeholders. I would just like to show a quick insight into it, where they acknowledge that emerging evidence sources, and they specifically point to Silico models and validated computational data, are not yet fully recognized, and they say that there is a regulatory lag relative to the technological and scientific advances. We think the maturity that Silico methods are having now is not recognized yet by the regulatory space, is what we have been advocating for, and that's readily reflected in the Commission document at the moment. And finally, also they say that there are different expectations between manufacturers and notified bodies. This is also the problem. We have difficulty in engaging with the regulators because the expectations are not matched. So these are just an acknowledgement of the call and the advocacy work that our community has been doing all along, not just VPH, but various initiatives in the space, not only in Europe, but across the globe. So this engagement with various stakeholders is important to raise this message out loud for us to see some changes happen. So what has actually changed or proposed to be changed? I should be very cautious that these are still proposals. So the first thing is they speak of simplification and proportionality, where they say that device safety need not be only restricted to clinical data. And this is something they acknowledge consistently across. So they say that wide range of data may qualify as clinical data, and in explaining that sentence, what they immediately refer to is use of new approach methodologies, such as Silico testing is promoted. So there are multiple references to new approach methodologies, and when they want to cite what type of new approach methodologies, they immediately point to Silico, not only in MDR, but also in other legislative proposals that have come out at this point of time. What this means is that there is consistent recognition, but it's not just referring to Silico in only one subsection, but in multiple instances within the revision proposals. As you can see, Article 61, 1 and 2 related to the GSPRs and the technical documentation, as well as further annexes also refer to Silico testing. So Silico for the first time is being explicitly mentioned by the term Silico, although computer modeling and simulation has been in the registration before, but in isolated pockets. But now we see a consistent reference to the terminology, but also the use of the methodology as evidence source. Further to it, there has been a long-standing debate what counts as clinical data. The definition of clinical data according to MDR is enlisted in Article 2, item number 48. That definition has not changed. So as of today, still it remains the same definition, that clinical data is coming from clinical investigation. But what has actually been proposed is that Though that is the case, they may be open to substitute this evidence with other sources of evidence, especially for low and medium risk devices. They acknowledge that doing clinical trials for low and medium risk devices is going to be expensive, not always necessary, and we may be able to substitute that evidence with other sources of evidence, and that's where they acknowledge in silico as a clear player. For example, I just point to Article 6110 because this is a specific article that points to those pathways that doesn't require clinical investigation. Previously, it was listed that bench testing and preclinical evaluation can be accounted as an evidence source, but now the revision text, especially the last line, you can see that spells out explicit that in vitro, ex vivo, in silico testing are evidence sources that they could consider for Article 6110, where conventional clinical investigation involving physical trials can be substituted through alternative sources of evidence. Of course, there are also other references where in silico is mentioned, especially when they speak about replacement of animal models, as well as other approaches. The most important take home from this slide that I want to point out is that though it is listed alongside replacement of animal tests across EU, what they do say that this evidence, the last line highlighted in the orange color, indicates that scientific evidence in clinical and non-clinical studies. So there is more openness to consider in silico evidence across the spectrum is our understanding, but this is still something that we have to understand and further strengthen in the coming months. So tangibly, one thing is already that we can practice today are the orphan pathway and the breakthrough pathway. Why? Because the revision proposes these two pathways, but these have already been enlisted along under the MDCG guidance back in 2024 June, and then now recently in December, the breakthrough pathway guidance has been released. Both of them make explicit reference to in silico and the acceptance of this in silico evidence as something to minimize the uncertainty when they have to evaluate high risk disruptive devices within the breakthrough pathway. Of course, this is going to be practiced. This is still a guidance in the early phase. We are going to do a pilot where they will invite certain submissions, and they will also learn through, and we will have to be proactive in to see what is happening and whether we can leverage the breakthrough pathway. So with that, I would like to give a quick wrap up of the revisions. It has been only at the superficial layer. My apologies. We will try to go a bit deeper in the next session. But if it's something that you would like to learn more or ask us to investigate further, please keep us posted. But what I would like to leave you with is these revisions are something very welcome, not just the broader changes in the MDR legislation, but especially the acceptance of in silico and other alternative sources of evidence is seen as a welcome message by various actors outside our community. So this is really encouraging to see that there are more champions that we could partner up in this process. The next webinar will specifically delve deeper into this, both on the pharma and the MDR, and also enlighten you about upcoming pilots where we could leverage to demonstrate our capabilities in leveraging in silico evidence for regulatory admissions. I'll pass on to Lies now.
Yes, because as Janaki pointed out, these are proposals. So that is not yet gained, and lots of things can still change. We have seen that in the past, where at the very last minute, as a sort of compromise, things get removed or swapped for other amendments. So what is at stake? Well, we are happy with the things that we've read, and in the way we interpret it, we feel that there is much more scope now to use in silico evidence, that there will be a stronger message also to the regulators to start looking at this and start and intensify the interactions with the community to get that evidence properly assessed and included into the packages. These are initial proposals, and we've already heard and read from other stakeholders in this space that there are some concerns and some skepticisms. For instance, clinicians right before the release of the proposed MDR revision, the CORE&D consortium released a paper where they again confirm in silico as a low quality evidence, citing issues with uncertainty quantification, showing, and which was in part also echoed by the Biomed Alliance. And this shows us that there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what in silico can do and aims to do, and what all these different terms mean, like uncertainty quantification. So that is definitely work that needs to be done. We have heard from patients' organizations that have safety concerns with the expedition of certain timelines, so the increase in certain timelines on the safety aspects. There are, of course, also patient organizations, especially in orphan, and that are happy with some of the proposed changes. And on the regulatory side, there is also still skepticism, which is a lot related to an incomplete understanding of what in silico actually means. Often it is now put in one pile with AI, everything. So AI has helped us to break into the daily conversation, let's say, so that people have this idea that you can do something with the data and you can create a model in the computer. But that being said, not everything that we do, of course, in the community is AI. They also equate this to synthetic data, so data that is generated based on other data using AI approaches. Where then, of course, if you have low quality data, you'll get low quality synthetic data. So all of these concepts, synthetic data, digital twins, in silico, AI, they're all the same. And so it makes it very difficult for them always to really see how the quality of all of these things is being checked. So there is work to be done. And that work is what we are preparing for now. So we will keep our engagement with policymakers. We will, the version or the analysis that Janaki showed you, this is something that we will share with the MEPs from Poland, from Lithuania, from Belgium, and others that we have been having individual conversations with, to show them that these are good things, but also to explain to them what they actually solve in terms of the problems that we have previously explained to them. So how this might actually be beneficial for their constituency. We will engage with the people that at the moment have voiced skepticism or concerns. So that we will try to engage with MDCG, with clinicians, with patient organizations, to further explain what in silico is, how it works, how we ensure the credibility of this, and what we aim to do. So we are not going to take over everything. AI is not going to replace all of the testing. So these things need to be framed. And then there is, of course, also the continuous work on the standards and the sharing of the best practices to demonstrate to the people holding the pen in the MDR revision and to the Parliament to show them the maturity of the field, and that, yes, we are working on proper standards that regulators can use to do the credibility assessment. So this is one work that is ongoing. At the same time, we will also to show the maturity and the advances in our community, share broadly recent advances, success stories, but also the challenges that we encounter when we are developing our in silico tools in this in health and care. We will not only involve patients, or we should not only involve patients in our early conversations and co-creation activities, which is now pushed a lot by the European Commission, but we should include all of the stakeholders, including regulators, policymakers. This is not, of course, not always easy, but that is why at a community level, VPH is trying to facilitate this in projects. And then we try to engage as much as possible in pilot programs, or at least have conversations with organizations launching pilot programs. As VPH Society, we can, of course, not participate in those specifically, but we would, that's where we come to you, and that is the third part of the activities, which is for individual members. How can I contribute? It has also been a question that was submitted in the pre-registration questionnaire, and that is exactly through a number of these things that you see here on the slide. Try to engage with your local MEPs if you know them, or invite them to your lab. We've noticed in the past that actually walking through a lab or looking at things hands-on is something that they are interested in, because it makes things more tangible. We have lots of materials already that we're happy to share with you that have worked for us in the past, both in a general setting and in individual conversations. Please send us your reports on advances, your success stories, your projects that you're involved with, so that we can publish them in the VPH newsletter, which is read by quite a lot of people also within the European Commission and the policymaker space. And then we can include these additional stories also in the global narrative. So now we have a number of stories that we can show how they already work. It would be nice to have more, so that we have a broader catalog to broadcast and to show the advances in the field. If you encounter problems and challenges, please let us know as well. As we will explain next week, we have set up certain programs also with team notified bodies, where we will be able to ask those questions, and then we will of course invite you as well to explain and to be present there. And then engage in pilot programs. So if there are pilot programs for breakthrough devices or for early devices, we will send out the information, but we will ask you to please also consider participating in those, because it's really only by engaging very practically that people on the other side, so the regulators, will feel that there is effectively a need. At the moment, it's a bit of a standoff, that people don't want to engage because they feel that there's not enough expertise on the other side, so it's pointless. But that gives the impression on the regulatory side that there's actually not really a demand to include more in silico evidence. So we really need to try and engage more in these kind of pilot projects. So with that, we have actually reached almost the very end of the seminar, and to reactivate you right before we ask you to ask questions, just a few general ones. So if you can please look at these two last questions. The first one is, would you like to be involved in some of these follow-up activities? Also to frame, we're actually, we weren't expecting 200 people. It's good to have a highly motivated people that are willing to get their hands dirty rather than have a big mass that is passive. So thank you very much for that indication. And then we'll go to the last question. With the contacts with MEPs, do you have them? Are you willing to make them? And if so, can you please write the name of the country that you know MEPs from? Or that you want to, that you can help us engage with it. We will be there to help you explain how you could approach this and find the right people to write to, because it's not the MEP, it's probably the first assistant that we should write to, but we've now have some examples of how this could be done successfully. Sorry, members of European Parliament. Yeah. That was something that we should have explained, that is part of the 101. Thank you for making that very, flagging this, we will take care. So this is European Parliament, and these are the members of European Parliament. So these would be the actual members that are now having to vote and negotiate on the proposed text. The texts were proposed by DG Connect, and now they are at the European Parliament, where it is up to the members of the European Parliament to vote on those and to decide which amendments are going to be put in, which things are going to be taken out. So as we mentioned, anything can change at this point in time still, which is why we cannot just sit back and relax, but we need to keep our contacts engaged, so that they understand that this is important and that they should not be negotiated out or traded out for some other things. But okay, very good. We can in the future maybe come back to all of you in the entire membership to ask for people to sign up and maybe give a specific how to deal with MEPs briefing session. Good. That was the end of what we wanted to tell you today. So any questions and concerns, reflections, comments, you can unmute yourself, turn on your camera, ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. And if you start speaking... Hello,
Lies.
Hi.
Hello, Janaki. Thank you for this.
Introduce yourself, but Irene, people know.
Okay. So Irene Villen-Clementel, I'm a director of research at INRIA, and I'm also a member of VPH. So I wanted to thank you, both of you, for this presentation. I will try to reach out to MEPs in France.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of them that are very like right wing. So I'm not going to contact this, I have to admit. But for some reason, I don't know why, but yes.
Yeah. No, it's we have, as I mentioned, we have the a slide deck with some general examples where we have indicated every time where this is coming from. It's always good to add some additional examples from your own country so that they have a feeling for who is sitting in this space. I think in France with the MIDI Twin project and other initiatives, it's very easy to find good initiatives and to show how this aligns with the interests of France. And then it's a matter of trying to put things down in a way that they can directly use. So we will try to make our analysis in such a way that it's just a brief one-pager that we can distribute, and then we can send it also to members, asking that to send to them, to their MEPs, so that they get this brief overview, maybe even together with a package.
Great, thanks.
You can answer this question for everybody, whether they can have access to the recording.
So the recordings will be after this session is over. What you will get is an email with a package which contains the recordings and some of the links to the documents that we mentioned, and then some contact details, of course, of how to get further engaged. And I think Janaki is going to share already a link to the documents and a first brief analysis that we did before the Christmas break, and he's going to put that in the chat. But so you will get that as well in an email, so that you have this content, the slide, again, all of the materials in there. Was a question on the time frame of all of this. So this typically can take up to 2 years before they reach a conclusion. We had the impression that they wanted to go a bit faster in this, because the Commission is pressed very much to get this done as soon as possible, which was why they had to work very hard to get it done right before Christmas. But so in the next 6 months, this will appear on the agenda of the Sant committee. So it might actually be going faster than the previous time, where it took 5+ years. Then, of course, it will take another couple of years to go into effect.
Yeah, or they may do something in between, is also something hypothesized, but we do not know whether they want to wait for the full 10-year evaluation or already roll it out by beginning of next year or end of this year. But that's super optimistic. But their regulatory community are saying that almost 80% of it should go through. The Parliament cannot complain, because there is already a lot of things that they were been asking for so long is there. So there is more willingness to get this across the line quicker, and then look at it as a pilot before the main re-evaluation happens in 2027, so that they can see if these changes are introduced, is it working or not, already from now until 2027, rather than wait to do everything at the end of 2027. Any other questions? If you have questions or challenges at your end from industry side, from a spin-off side, feel free to reach out to us with your questions. We may not have answers, we may not be experts on that topic, but it certainly helps us to understand the frictions and the challenges that you face, so that we can bring it to the right people and also feed you back with the answers if we manage to get through.
Yeah, and please some of this work is, of course, also discussed and prepared and well envisioned in the working groups of the Avicenna Alliance, where as VPH member, you're by default member of the academic half of the Avicenna Alliance, and the industry members here are already members of the Avicenna Alliance. So there is the IMDRF working group, the Global Harmonization Working Group. There is a standards task force. So there are different task forces and working groups where aspects of this are discussed. So you can find more information both on the website of VPH and of the Avicenna Alliance. So if you want to just if you don't feel comfortable right now engaging in this space, but you want to learn more and maybe engage later, then participating in these task forces and working groups would be an ideal way to get started. That's also essentially how I, as a total ignorant person on policy, when I was a starting PI, got involved. You just listen, and after a few times you get the hang of it, you start to understand how these things work, and then you can participate and really help drive this further. So there is no expectations of an in-depth knowledge of any policy-related elements, just a willingness to share and advance in silico medicine. That's what we are looking for at this moment.
Yeah, the same with me. I had oddly, like if you ask me, within the projects I did a lot in the first 2 years, but to transform into something as a policy action, that took some time and more hands-on, I would say, rather than something that you can go read and do it overnight.
Yeah. Okay, so as we had indicated, I don't think, Janaki, there are any more questions now.
If you want to react, say a thumbs up, question, or hands up. How will you see? Yes, somebody is raising their hands. No?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Hi. Hello. Thank you so much for the call. Most of all, I'm still a PhD student, so I'm even new on the field of technology. But this is something that I really like to do, and being part of the In Silico Society is really important. I had the pleasure to meet Professor Marco Viceconti, and he was one of the guys that made me very interested in these kind of things, and he told me about the society. And he's someone that you probably know better than me how much he has tried to put this forward in terms of regulation and documentation. Is someone that is really important. The only question that I have, and I think you didn't mention it, but if you did, I'm so sorry for it. Anyway, one of the main problems of our PhD and my research work that I've been developing for the past 5 years is related with the uncertainty quantification that we have on clinical trials, and especially on clinical software. I developed clinical software and for the heart. And the question that I have is that in terms of politics, or even if you could help me, if there's a specific organization of a group of people that is actually trying to put more effort into making tools for uncertainty quantification and sensitivity analysis, because I feel like that's the main problem that we have when we bring a software tool, even if it's a machine learning tool or something, to the doctors, and they can always ask us, what does that mean? What are the standards of that? And all of that you probably know better than me, the technical term. Yeah, that was the question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's indeed a difficult one. The VMV spends a lot of time on the verification and the validation part, and then leaves off on the doesn't go into the same detail on the uncertainty quantification. There are and there have been projects that have focused on the uncertainty quantification pipelines, like VECMA project and some others. They are, I think, in the VHT roadmap. We do talk about this a little bit, but I must admit I'm not 100% aware of real projects that focus on this specifically.
I don't know if Sim Institute has something in that space. Niels is here. That's the only name that comes to my mind.
Yeah, that's Niels has his hand up. So maybe Niels, the view and it's Sim Institute. No, that doesn't.
That's me.
Sorry, that was a mouse. So, but it's a very fair question. It's actually also part of the tools that we were looking at as to incorporate, or that should be incorporated in the VHT platform that currently has started to be developed. So this tender process for the VHT platform that was concluded, and the consortium that won the tender is now starting with the low-level requirement elicitation sessions. And I fully anticipated that from the community of users, these kind of workflows, including the uncertainty quantification workflows, would be part of that. Because now everybody is doing a bit their own thing and reinventing the wheel a lot. but there are a number of, I can look up some more stuff and send it to you.
We can also chat. I just also want to say, in terms of my humble knowledge in the field, I also the fact that, well, for example, there are people that have been working on this field much longer than me and are probably better than me, that all of the things behind uncertainty quantification, I think, if as you were saying, they are really important in the sense that even with machine learning and all of these new algorithms that we are creating, going from a numerical method to a machine learning model that creates a mechanism, it goes from a mechanistic to a probabilistic model. This needs to be, probably you know better than me, discussed really well in terms of all of the policies and the way to do it with isoforms and stuff like that. Because I also feel we are on a very good place in the sense that we don't need to have a mathematically described uncertainty quantification, in the sense that medicine will always be probabilistic. So we have an advantage there. I don't know how to work with that. Probably someone knows better than me, and if they want to have a discussion about that, that would be very helpful for me as well. But yeah, I just wanted to keep this here.
Yeah, I think those are also very interesting questions to pose to regulators. I mean, because they would want to see the uncertainty quantification, but at the same time, it's kind of it has to be a dialogue, because they first need to understand what uncertainty quantification is. Because if you go to a notified body and you happen to and yeah, there's many clinicians there as well, and on top of in addition to more technical people, the very fact that it's called uncertainty quantification implies that there is uncertainty. And so they kind of say, oh, but even yourself, you're not sure about how this would work. Whereas any model, including clinical trials, which are also a model, has uncertainty, only you can't always quantify it that well. So there's, again, that translation gap that exists that we need to first bridge before we can then actually ask, so what is it that you need to see from these models? And that will have to be part, I think, of a conversation, the same way as when you do clinical trial, you go to your national competent authority and you try to outline what is the question that you want to answer. So what is the trial design that you should do? These questions, probably in these pre-consultations, that is part of those early engagement conversations to be done. So that is on what needs to be done, and then how do we need to do it? That is then something that within the community we need to work more on sharing the workflows for the different examples. That's a good point.
Thank you so much for the discussion. Then I will also try to talk with some people here in both the UK and Ireland, and also I'm Portuguese. I'll try to talk with some people in Portugal as well. They normally are very keen to this kind of work, especially on the cardiovascular side. So thank you so much once again. And next week I'll be again to listen to the other talk.
Okay. Thank you. So if there's no more questions and comments, then I think we can conclude the webinar here. If you have any feedback for us immediately following this, or you want to point out certain things that you really want us to address next week, please feel free to send them along to the admin email address or anyone at VPH. We will be able to bring them together, and we look forward to maybe seeing some of you next week, and otherwise to engage further with you in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much from my side. Thanks for your time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.